I think I figured out the 15 characters of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles set. So join me for this video as we dive into the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles sets, the media that is going to be pulled from, and what characters I think we're going to be seeing in the set. Welcome to Universus, and we are deep in the sewers of New York as we're hanging out with the 4 turtles that everyone is hyped to see join Universus, and seeing if we can predict the 11 people that are going to be joining them. So you're not going to want to miss out on this, because I think I'm about to make a lot of people very angry with these predictions, and I'm sure that you're going to want to vent that rage in the comments below, or just show up at my door going, "You're wrong." Let's immediately knock this down to 11 from 15. There's no way that the 4 boys, Michelangelo, Leonardo, Raphael, and Donatello, are not in the set. Yes, they are part of the starters, but if you want to sell the boxes, if you want to sell the cards, and you want to get people hyped around it, you need to have them in the set. Percy and Bo had starters, they were still in the main set. Mikasa and Eren had starter decks, they were still in the main set. Izuku and Bakugo had starters, they were not in the main set. But they were classed as part of the main set on their numbering. That's fine. I think we're in a position now where to sell these boxes, the 4 boys will be in the set. It's just as simple as. So we have 11 slots open. It sounds like, it doesn't sound like a lot, but there's a lot to go through. As the sell sheets for UVS have said, they're adapting from 4 sources for the art: Tales of TMNT, Mutant Mayhem, the 80s cartoons, and the action figures. That doesn't tell us where the cards are going to be designed from, that's telling us where we're going to get the art from. So any big fans of the live action, the 2003 to 2012 Rise of TMNT may be a bit disappointed, but chances are we're not going to see stuff from there. We might see nods to it, but we're not going to see stuff from there. The main advertising on the box and the way that it's done is Mutant, Mayhem, and Tales of TMNT. My theory is that is where we're going to be deriving the majority of the set. We're going to see 80s alt arts, we're going to see alt arts for the figures. I think like assets and backups would be very cool with alt art figures, and the alt art characters may have that 80s kind of feel to them, with some of the other cards having 80s feel to them. I think this is going to be one of the sets where we see the most amount of alt art, because they're going to be deriving a lot of stuff from there. But I think the main focus of the set will be Mutant, Mayhem, and Tales of TMNT, with 80s and the action figure aspect of it being alternate art and more the collector's side of it, rather than what was being designed around. I know that immediately some of you are looking to turn off this video the more I've said that, but that doesn't mean we won't be seeing some of the classic characters. So what we can do here is we can produce a Venn diagram of the characters that are in Mutant Mayhem and the characters that are in Tales of TMNT, and cross that over with the characters of the 80s shows that were very popular in the action figures, so we can then produce what characters and cards are going to be in the set based on what is in both sides. Now, let's start off this video getting some hate before we move into the characters. April O'Neil is going to be a backup. April O'Neil in the 80s offered nothing to the story outside of victim. Their entire purpose was to discover something new, discover some news, get kidnapped, be rescued. They didn't offer as much to the story as they have done in more recent years. And even in Mutant Mayhem and Tales of TMNT, they are a side character. They offer backup, they offer support. They're not a main character in the story. As much as I'm going to get hate for this, and as much as I got hate talking about this on Discord, the same goes for Splinter. Splinter is a backup. He is a mentor, he is someone that is going to help them, but in Mutant Mayhem, in Tales of TMNT, in the more recent IPs, he doesn't get involved as much as you'd expect. And even in the past IPs, he doesn't. He's there to offer support, he's there to back them up, he's there to instill wisdom into them and help them become stronger. He does offer some offers some skills in the fight. He just offers some skills as the character, but it's not enough to warrant one of 11 coveted spaces. Along the same lines, I think we'll see things like Genghis Frog, Ray Fillet, Mondo Gecko, Wingnut, Leatherhead, all of which are contenders for a character spot. They do offer a lot more to the story, especially more than what Shredder kind of offers. But I think they still kind of fall into the backup line. But there is one slot that is kind of interchangeable with all of these. So it's hard to say they've done enough to become characters over being backups. But then when we look at some of the characters in there, so let's start off with number 10 and number 11 and number 10. Easy one. It's on the packaging of the car of the boosters. They were part of Mutant Mayhem, and they have been a staple of the IP for ages, including the 80s comics. This is Bebop and Rocksteady, the iconic hench mutants of Shredder. We've loved to see them, in every interpretation, from the 80s to the Michael Bay to how these all go down. They offer comedic slapstick, they offer great insight into what's going on, and they were kind of just a staple of TMNT for a very long time. We've seen them on the packaging for the TMNT booster set, and I think that them having their own characters rather than a combined character is where they're going. I know some people have said, oh, they'll just be on one character. I think we're going to get Bebop, and I think we're going to get Rocksteady, and they're going to have some very cool abilities, and maybe even have some fun interactions if they're using each other's attacks. Moving on from there, I want to cut this down even faster by putting 9, 8, and 7 all together with the main villains of the second car of Tales of TMNT Season 1, the East River 3. So the East River 3 are aquatic life from the East River of New York that when Mutant Mayhem ended and Superfly was put into the river, they mutated, they grew, and they didn't quite know what was happening and what they needed to do. So all they wanted to really do was go back to the life they had, and when Superfly was taken out, they kind of ended up falling under a bad influence. All they want is to get their pearl back, go back to their life in the East River, and just get back to their lives. So the East River 3, unfortunately, they get manipulated by their leader, and the mob boss pull him into a life of crime where they want to steal the pearl that they worship or look after for their friends, and then they're going to sell it to live comfortably. So let's take a look at the East River 3. We have Mustang Sally, a seahorse looking to get back in the water, provide a great life for their babies, and is a very relatable and strong character that offers a lot of trouble for the turtles with their skills and mutated abilities. Speaking of trouble for the turtles, we have Eel Lee, a shockingly powerful electric eel, causing trouble for the boys by turning their greatest strength into a massive liability in the water, electrifying the water, being slippery, being very hard for them to deal with. A great antithesis for the turtles. And their leader, Goldfin, a goldfish corrupted by greed and the pursuit of money and gold. We're looking to make it big by stealing the giant pearl, as I mentioned, make it rich, and betraying the other two. These are very relatable villains that when you hear their backstories, when you look at what they're trying to do, it's hard to identify them as evil and more just misunderstood and kind of led down the wrong path. They had a huge impact into the second core of Tales of TMNT. They were hard to deal with, relatable villains that became more redeemable, apart from Goldfin, as the story went on, and you learned a lot about them. Even though they're only in 6 episodes compared to like the history of it, I think these would be a great shout. Alt art wise, not the best, because they don't really have the 80s kind of thing to rely on to have as an art, but they do have action figures, they do have real life things that you can pull in to make their alt arts. I think it's very interesting, but I think Mustang Sally, Eel Lee, and Goldfin are going to be characters. Quite similarly, if we move in number 6, we get Pigeon Pete. Now, Pigeon Pete has been around for a long time. He debuted in the 90s in the comics, but was deemed too inappropriate for kids to be featured in the cartoons. Pigeon Pete was, however, in the 80s cartoons as a reference when Michelangelo rescued a pigeon and then indoctrinated it into the turtles with a little bandana and named the pigeon Pete. So we do have a pigeon Pete that we can rely on, and I think that would be hilarious all art if we just have this cracked looking mental pigeon that has it all out of this sweet looking white pigeon. But I digress. Pigeon Pete in Tales of TMNT was created when Michelangelo's blood mixed with some trash and was put onto some food that a pigeon ate, and was a very instant transformation. Pigeon Pete has featured in past media, looking at the 2012 TMNT, and of course, where I just mentioned that it was in the 80s comics. The main reason I think Pigeon Pete will be featured over Leatherhead or Scuttlebug or Genghis Frog is their relevance to the story. They're part of the Bishop arc where they get created and help out Michelangelo and Rod. In the second core, they're even more important, especially once they kind of have their power-up awakening Ultra Instinct moment where they get to help out in the fight, where they get to point out everything that's going on and they show off their real intelligence. I think for that alone, although they're only in one mini-series that was part of Paramount Plus, I think Pigeon Pete deserves the slot, and I think Pigeon Pete is going to get the slot. Moving into top 5. This is 2 characters in one. In Mutant Mayhem, Baxter Stockman is a researcher looking at mutations and experimenting with mutations, and takes home a mutated fly which he raises like a son. In Mutant Mayhem, he is killed off, and Superfly that's their villain origin. They become determined to take out humanity, to keep mutation going, and kind of get revenge for the loss of their father. However, in past media, Superfly was Baxter Stockman. He was a scientist who mutated with a fly to become a fly mutant. So it wasn't until Mutant Mayhem that Superfly and Baxter Stockman kind of separated and became 2 separate entities. So this is why I think we're going to see either a Baxter Stockman transform character into Superfly, or we might just see a Superfly that has the Baxter Stockman mutant art as their alt art. I think Baxter Stockman / Superfly is a very good shout. Superfly is the main villain of Mutant Mayhem. Dr. Baxter Stockman has been a prevalent figure throughout all of TMNT, from the 80s comics to every single iteration. In some way or form has had this scientist that aids the villains, or aids the government, or aids the turtles in themselves in processing their mutagens. And that scientist has pretty much always been referenced as being Dr. Baxter Stockman, if they don't even have a name. So I think Baxter Stockman has to be in the set. And I think the fact that Superfly leads into the East River Free and creates this kind of scenario has this lasting impact on the new franchise. It'd be wrong for Superfly and Dr. Baxter Stockman not to be in the set. The number 4 slot to me goes to Rod. Now, I know, for everyone who's going, who the fuck is Rod? Rod is Bishop's assistant, and he could quite rightly be a backup. And this sort of slot could go to Leatherhead, or Genghis Frog, or Scuttlebug, or any of the other characters I said was a backup. But the fact that Rod is so impactful, has this presence, and wants to be a mutant, and is part of the wrapping up of the Bishop story, as well as the fact that really 3 cards from the second core, we need to kind of round out with some more cards from the first core. Because if we look at Heroes of Exandria, everything was balanced. We had 10 Mighty 9, 10 Vox Machina, 4 Mighty 9 Chromes, 4 Vox Machina Chromes, 10 Vox Machina characters, 10 Mighty 9 characters. Everything was balanced. So similar here, if we see 3 villains from the second core of TMNT, we should see 3 villains from the first core of TMNT. And Rod technically comes under the villains because he is helping Bishop to take down the mutants. But realistically, he just wants to be one himself. He was there for the creation of Pigeon Pete because it was meant to be him who took the mutagenic serum to allow him to transform. There's a lot of creative space in a character that's this bland and kind of unique in their views, but this was kind of like my interchangeable spots. The number 3 spot goes to the villain of part 1 of Tales of TMNT, the first core, Dr. Bishop, the scientist looking to advance the world with mechanical enhancements. Her sister's disabilities caused her to come to hate mutants as she tried to create robotic enhancements and robotic equipment that could help people live better lives throughout their disabilities, and will be, in my opinion, be part of the rogues gallery of Mutant Mayhem 2 after what happened at the end of TMNT, of Tales of TMNT. After her prize mech was destroyed, saving her during a mutant horse attack which the turtles were trying to put down, she grew to hate mutants and all mutations. She created the Mechazoids to take down the mutants and created some code advances to register. And the issue was the Mechazoids themselves grew more advanced and kind of lost in definition what a mutation was. They go after Rod because he has a deviation in his eyes, which they put down as a mutation. The entire point of the first core is to point out that humans have their own mutations in their DNA. And I think this would be a great one to put in with Bishop. She has a very tragic backstory. She has good reasoning for what she's doing. She's just doing it wrong. And the moment she's kind of like, yeah, I know I was doing it wrong, the government got, no, we want to help you do this again. Again, like Rod and the East River 3, there's no 80s counterpart, but there's action figures. There's other ways we can kind of draw in for alt arts. It would be a real shame not to have this card come in as an inventor tech kind of card, like bounce off Donnie's kind of aspects. I think Bishop is kind of guaranteed to be in there. Number 2, my penultimate prediction, is the upgraded Mechazoid. So the Mechazoids become self-aware. They start writing their own codes. They can't be shut down, and they start being able to, and they start analyzing mutations in all aspects of humans that do not have, essentially, just any kind of deviations to the human genome. They ignore their orders. They start targeting any mutation in DNA, and they become a huge threat to Rod, Bishop, and the Turtles. And it's very hard to take them down. This is a perfect kind of 5-hander utilitarian character with a lot of health that is going to be very cool to see how UVS can adapt and take the aspects of the Mechazoids with the adaptability that they have for mutations and for mutants in their codes and their abilities. I think that this is where we're going to see the Mechazoids come in. Number 1, the last slot I think will go in, although not part of the main Tales of TMNT or Mutant Mayhem stories, not even really shown in them, it's Shredder. Shredder shows up in a post-credit end of movie Mutant Mayhem aspect where he's brought in to help take down the Turtles, and I think he is going to be working with Bishop to in some sort of symbiotic relationship almost, where they're going to be working together to try and tackle the tackle the boys in Mutant Mayhem 2. He wasn't really part of Mutant Mayhem, but he's a big part of the 80s. He was a very iconic character. He's been much beloved since his iterations, and I think this is where he's coming in. He's going to be in the sequel. He's been very in the 80s. He has been the boss of Bebop and Rocksteady for a very long time, and I think having no Shredder or having no Shredder would be just a mistake. Although he has very little screen time in the current iteration, I think Shredder needs to be in there. He's a selling point. He's something that fans will be hyped for. And even if we have, say, a Super Shredder PvE in there, we still need Shredder in the main set. I think it would be an absolute shame if we don't. And I think the best PvE, to add like a little 0 in there, like a character we're going to see in there, would be taking down the Technodome, having Krang show up, who was the main villain, main bad guy of the 80s cartoons and has popped up in the Michael Bay movies and other ones along there. I think Krang will show up in PvE and will be a very hard boss to deal with as we kind of do an escape the Technodome, but he will not be in this set. This set is going to derive mainly from Mutant Mayhem and Tales of TMNT, which he's not featured in, and will then use the 80s aspects for all tats to kind of pull in the collectors and the nostalgia, similar with the action figures. So those are my top choices for the 15 characters of TMNT, and my reasoning why I think that is the decision that they're going to go with. I can already feel people commenting that Rod is an absolute stretch and one of the other mutants should go in there. And I said, yeah, Leatherhead, Wingnut, they all deserve a spot in there similar to Rod, but I think Rod kind of just ties in a little bit neater with how the Tales of TMNT is going down. Or we could see one of the side characters from the Mutant Mayhem movie, which, you know, the other mutants are featured quite heavily in, could pop in there. It's hard to say. It's more, for me, it's more just Rod is an easy choice, whereas if you look at Wingnut and Leatherhead, you're going to have to put them all kind of in, and it becomes a lot more diluted. If we had more than 15, I would happily say they were going to be characters, but let me know what you think is going to be going in there. Are you excited for TMNT? I know most people are. And do you think I'm right in my predictions here as to which characters are going to be in there and how they cross over with the 80s and the action figures? Let me know. I would love to have some accompaniment down here in the sewers eating some pizza and talk more TMNT. I have more videos coming. I will see you there.